was a sound of the voice of my partner who called me to check in, if to be sure that I have not overslept. I indeed have overslept today. So that was the first thing I heard, my partner's voice asking how am I and if I am awake already at 12. I visited my friend in early February 2022. They found out that they are expecting a baby. And today I was listening. They have a son, Ostap, and I've been listening to them sing a lullaby to him. And that was a song by, like, an original song created by Ukrainian pop singer and songwriter who was famous in the 90s, Natalia Mogilevska. And I remembered that my mother actually sang me this song when I was of Ostap's age. And this was quite emotional. I was invited by Peter Paul Keinrad from Klangform Wien to listen to the rehearsal of Klangform Wien performing In Vain by Haas, and listening Klangform Wien live in the acoustics that was there. This was really profound, and I think it reminded me, because in that period of time I was not really writing music. I was just being a manager and mostly wearing the hat of a manager. It reminded me, and it have woken up inside me the urge to compose again. And actually, sitting there and listening to In Vain, I really like this piece. I felt that I'm in presence of a voice, of a very strong voice of an artist of a Beethoven scale. Then the second one is, of course, there's a lot of, but this one I just recalled it and I realized, oh my God, this is important for me. So when I was a teenager, like around 14 years old, I was studying with a piano teacher, Irina Lepatova, who was one of the, like, leading kids youth teachers for piano in Ukraine. And she was teaching us to, you know, to listen what happens in the piano when you press the key, to really, she taught me really to listen what happens when the hammer touches the string. And she played a chord, just one chord from the piece I was playing. It was Hamol, 3 notes. And she played it like 5 or 6 times, and each time this chord sounded different. Uh, and at that moment, I felt as I'm in presence of pure magic, something very deep and thoughtful and heartfelt. I think I was 5 or 6 years at that moment. At my grandfather, he he bought a Sony Walkman for me, like headphones and cassette player. And also he bought some cassettes with like classical orchestra music. And I remember sitting on the couch and he gave me this Walkman and pressed play and I put on the headphones, and this was first time I heard orchestra playing. Actually, I started with composing. I didn't know it was called composing at that moment. So when I was growing up, like 3, 4, 5, 6 years, there was a piano, upright piano in my room, and my mother, she, like, when in her childhood times, she studied in a music school, and in that time she wrote one piece, and this is the only thing she could play when she was a mother already. So that's what she was doing time to time. Also, as a lullaby for me, she was playing this piece, and I knew that this is something she wrote. And actually, I still remember every note of this piece. I'm thinking maybe someday I should write it down, but I have not yet. Have not done this. And then my grandfather, um, he was not trained as a musician, but he liked music throughout all his life, and he was sometimes he was playing on this piano with just one finger or two fingers, trying to reproduce the melodies of the songs he knew. And he would press each note until he hears the right one, and then he was searching for the next one. He had a very good ear for that. So when I was a kid, I had the impression that this is what people do. They just sit at the piano or they take some instrument and they start doing something. So at some moment, and I actually remember this moment. I did the same thing. I opened the piano and I started playing. I started searching for different intervals. I didn't know those are called intervals, but I remember doing that. And then I started, just doing something. And in the end, I had two pieces. Again, I didn't know the word composing, but I composed. I now I can say that I composed two pieces. The first one was called Cosmos, like space, and second was called Spanish Dance. So it took me time to appreciate uh, not only speaking through music, but also listening to what others have to say in music. And this another like the teacher I ended up studying with, Irina Lipatova, that I mentioned. It was just with her that I've learned to appreciate genuinely appreciate the music of others. Th- In terms of performing, in terms of listening, I always liked to do this, but not performing. Uh, so this is how I started, and then of course I kind of like my path was shaped as a path of like a classical pianist, maybe even a concert pianist. I was quite good in that and promising, but I felt, I realized that I do not want to dedicate my life to this path. It's quite stressful. It demands dedication, uh, hours of sitting next to piano and learning pieces. As for composition, um, I do not need a piano, but depending on what instrument I use or do not use, of course, it shapes how the music is written. So when I do use a piano or a keyboard, like even like this small little keyboard, it really influences what the result. I didn't compose like properly compose music for 9 years. I just started in January last year. I finished my first score in 9 years. I did write, and I do write for fun, silly pop songs. So this is another thing I do, but just for myself and to share with friends. I started valuing honesty, but I cannot say like what kind of honesty. Is this artistic honesty? Is this emotional honesty? Is this something else? Which makes me like when I write something, I make a draft and then I develop it for 1 week, and then I realize that it's not working. So I just put aside this draft and I start from the scratch. And so this is time consuming, and also this like for me it's really emotionally and psychologically like a heavy lifting. This process involves diving deep inside my psyche, and it just happens. and then I need to face something inside myself that I don't really. I would I would rather not see. I would rather not feel. I would rather not bear, and sometimes it is unbearable. But only writing music makes me go there, which is eventually healthy and helpful. When I finish the piece, I feel at peace. And also, for one day, I remember feeling that I'm almighty, that I'm so powerful, I can do whatever. It is very funny and silly to say this, but this is exactly what I feel like. I finished this. I'm so powerful. It is like a small child who like built a castle or like a sand castle or something. It takes me from 6 to 10 hours to warm up. And in these 6 to 10 hours, I don't write music. I just walk. I cannot do anything. I cannot work on projects. I cannot talk to people really. I just do random things, forcing myself to finally sit at the table. And then when I'm finally start, I can work for 10 or 12, or once I worked for 16 hours nonstop without food. Sometimes but I did smoke. This is something I don't skip. 10 years ago in April, the idea of KCMD came into my head, and in December of this year, 10 years ago, it will be 10 years exactly when we started the festival, first festival. And throughout this time, within KCMD, also while working for 2 years in the Ukrainian Institute and 2 years working in the arts agency for arts and artistic education related to the Ministry of Culture. So everything I did with this picture in mind of a young, like 18 years old composer uh, in 2093 for some reason in Ukraine. So in the times when probably no one who is around right now would be around. And I envision that this person, this young person, young musician in Ukraine would feel secure to go on with being, for example, a composer, and that the path of composer in their own country would be clearer, more clear for them that it was to me when I was 18. And I was, and I imagine that this person would have a clear vision of what is possible at home. I also imagine that they would feel like safe being themselves. This person would feel free to travel the world, but also to come back to home and contribute to the ongoing development of the music scene in their country, in other countries, in Europe, contribute to the world, and also have some instruments, clear, understandable instruments in their hands that would allow them to shape the future of the scene and the future of their country in 2093. Uh, in a really general way, I will start from the abstract part. I like I decided to find ways to explore, this concept of presence and absence. I have some algorithms that will make the audience hear and also not hear a certain musician. I'm also using a poem by my favorite Ukrainian poet who yeah, that is not present as text and is not present as sound, is just present as a rhythm. I've challenged myself, or I don't know, this was not like a conscious decision, but now I realize that I've put myself in challenge of playing a quite serious, from my perspective, game of looking inside and finding, you know, evil. Yeah, aggression, but not in like all these aspects of human nature that usually stay in shadow of being nice, polite, and things like that. Sometimes to protect yourself, you need to be aggressive, and this is something that I'm exploring right now. Renewal for me, or reconstruction, is like, in order to reconstruct something, first you need to understand what is there to reconstruct, and how did this come here, and what belongs, and what was just uh, you know happened to find itself here, and maybe you need to hug it, and then say goodbye. Ukrainian Cultural Foundation, the institution that was created by people who went into government after the Revolution of Dignity. So they created the institution that was and is still providing grants to artists, which is normal for Germany, and but this was the first one specifically by the Ukrainian state, and that the one that was using Ukrainians' taxes. And throughout the years, I don't remember the number, but significant number of projects emerged in all kinds of spheres of culture throughout all Ukraine, not only Kyiv, not only major cities, but little villages and stuff. A lot of them uh, became quite impactful. So this is something I think is worth mentioning, and I feel very proud of those who created this Ukrainian Cultural Foundation. I worked in this National Agency for Arts and Artistic Education, and I joined it like on first days when it appeared. And I, among other people, which were many and much more experienced, and like colleagues that I trust, were members of the board gathered of advisors for the Minister of Culture, who invited different people uh, to work on the like strategy for reforming the Minister of Culture. I learned and I realized how the reform, of the practical ways, how the reform can actually be done. I've quickly learned that the main issue is not who is in charge or who holds position of one or another organization, institution, whatever. What is much more important is the rules of the system. This is just a short example of how it is indeed possible practically to change the system through analyzing the system, learning what is the main reason and what is the main cause of the problem, and then bringing together the community to change it in such a way that it wouldn't matter who is in the position later on. Music for me is not a career. Maybe it has something to do also with the fact that I like just one generation before myself in Ukraine, composers were, they were writing music for free mainly. Sometimes they even paid to be performed. So it was not something you can earn with. I found myself a couple of times in situation when I was not paying attention to my musical side, and I ended up finding myself in hospitals, uh, uh, which which made me learn that just for the sake of my health and staying alive genuinely, I need to be involved in music. So there's that. But then to be able to exist as a composer, yeah, in this world, I need a career. But this has something to do with just, the system I find myself within. I have found for many times in my life myself in a situation when people didn't really called things I was talking about utopias. And now having the 10 years of experience, w- just there is something I can lean to to prove what I am about to say. I not only believe now, but I also clearly see, based on the experience, that if you clearly see the future you want to happen, and if you dedicate enough time and energy to make this happen, and also try to stay as honest as possible, this future will come.